But why? Why is he taking the time to do this?
He doesn't want it to be. He doesn't want anybody to argue with him about it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He wants to say it clearly enough so that it can be said and be said one time and be done with it.
Wow.
In other words, what he's saying is saying, look, like if you try to explain floating to a doctor, for instance, the doctor's going to argue with you about it because he's going to say that's magic. It isn't. But he's going to argue with you about it because it doesn't fit his scientific modalities. Okay?
Sure.
If you say, okay, you can't sense gravity. If the doctor hasn't never floated, he doesn't know what that means. You know, what the fuck you mean you can't sense gravity? Gravity's always with us. Well, that's true, but you can't sense it when you're when you're floating. You can't hear anything. Well, sure you can hear things. No, you can't really, because we're going to reduce it down as far as we can. You can't see anything. You know, the darkness is darkness is darkness. You can't see anything. You're not going to feel any pressure on your body. The temperature is going to be the same, so you can't tell what the edge of your skin is actually.
What's the all use true. Of that?
Well, right. So what's the use of any of that? Well, that allows you to be able to examine what you're doing and change it somewhat without having to worry about all those things intruding upon your thinking at the moment. Well, I don't see the advantage of that. Well, I can see that you don't. But that doesn't mean that there's not an advantage. It means that you don't see it. That's all. So if you can start from there and you say, okay, what are we, you know, in other words, Lilly puts it out and he says it in such a way that you can't really argue with him about it. Say, yeah. If you can do those things that he lists there, then you're going to have more circuitry for sure. Because the more circuitry that you have is going to be dependent on what else you don't have to consider. Now, yeah. So in order to examine what it is that you need to examine, for instance, let's take a memory. Just take any memory that you want to examine. Let's go back to our friend that Mama hates him. If he could go back and examine the event where he perceived that to take place, he'd probably see it differently. But he'd have to go back and remember all of those things. He'd have to project it all as if he were there. Mm-hmm. He'd actually have to hold that. He'd have to pull that all out of storage and project it out here in the world, out here in front of him, where he can see it, and examine that all of the aspects of that thing. And so that's going to change a lot about who you are and what you're thinking about, because you can't do that normally. Because you get waylaid by those priority programs, you get waylaid by meta programs, by evasions and by defenses and all kinds of stuff. You get waylaid by those things, and when you're in the tank and you don't have all that other stimulation that you have to protect yourself from, that gives you the advantage of being able to project it without it being threatening any longer.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is probably the biggest argument we're going to make for floating as a tool is what he's laying out right here, because I can confirm. I mean, you know, I have probably done a couple hundred floats, not as much as some people, but more than a lot. And as these things are no longer being paid attention to by your mind, right? Like as you're floating and your mind settles into the idea that it doesn't have to balance itself anymore. It's not regulating temperature. There's no sound. There's no visual inputs. All of those activities and the energy that's required from your computer, your biocomputer, to focus on those, the programs go offline and the brain says, okay, here, you can use this energy somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And where are you going to use it?
Exactly right.
You're going to use it to look at that memory.
Yep. That's what you can do. And so what else happens for you is the more you float is the more of that stuff that you can look at during regular waking hours, let's say.
Right. Because you're normalizing the tank space.
Not only are you normalizing it, but you're also reducing the amount of circuitry that's required to pay attention to those external reality things. You're making that paying attention to it much more efficient with time as well. Yeah. Yeah, that you're right about that. That's what happens.
Yeah. Okay. That's, I mean, like I said, this might be the biggest argument for floating. So I mean, I'll say that I actually started floating before I found any of the things that we're talking about. Before I found your book, The Office of Shaman, right? So my experience started with floating, and I had
Right.
no idea that it was a tool to be used in the way that we are now laying out how that works.
Right. Well, I think that's true for a lot of people who float. Is they're recreational floaters, as it were.
Yeah. Yep.
But then you see somebody like Steph Curry who's making 3-point shots from half court,
Right.
who is thinking about all that in the tank. Okay, who's going through. Okay, what do I need to do here to get that done in the tank? And you say, oh, okay, that's a tool there. So you think about it differently then.
Yeah.
And so we have younger fellows come along that's going to do what he did and then some, because
Oh yeah.
they're also going to think about it in the tank. And so we can see that we can see that the future, as it were, coming along here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't want those same kids. We don't want those same kids hallucinating that they are what Steph Curry is, unless they can do what Steph Curry does.
Yeah.
Okay, that's also true. And it's like that they need to have that stimulus of somebody saying this is how it's done, which is great stuff, I think.
I agree. I definitely agree.